So I'm the former commander of U.S. Army Civil Affairs and Psychological Operations. Have quite a bit of experience in civil affairs from Bosnia in 1996, Kosovo in 2001, a couple deployments to Iraq in 2003 and 2008, and retired from the military in 2019, and just recently retired from my civilian job. Our guest speaker or keynote speaker is Brigadier General Beaurpere, and he is the commanding general of the U.S. Army JFK Special Warfare Center and School, and also the Special Operations Center of Excellence. Also, of course, the proponency for civil affairs resides with him. He was commissioned as an infantry officer from Boston College through Army ROTC. His initial assignments were with the 1st and 2nd Infantry Divisions. He also had some experience with 4th Infantry Division. He's commanded at every level within U.S. Army Special Operations and a wide variety of deployments. I think of interest is he also has a master's degree from Morocco, and he's also a graduate of the Army War College Fellows Program in Singapore. So a lot of international experience outside of the military also. So welcome, Will, and we're looking forward to your comments. He's going to talk about the Civil Affairs Force of 2030. So with that, I'll turn it on over to you, Will.
Hey, sir, thanks very much for the warm introduction. Can you hear me okay? Just looking for a thumbs up, make sure you all have it. Great. Thank you. Hey, Joe, good to see you too. Thanks for the introduction as well. So ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you. And I get a sense from just looking at the group chat that we are literally scattered all around the world right now. I think somebody came up from Istanbul, Turkey too. So that's pretty neat. I hope everybody had a good Veterans Day weekend with all your families and loved ones, as our nation took some time over the past few days to honor and remember all those who have served, many of whom are on their own today. So for our veterans present today, thank you all for your service and commitment to defending our nation. And again, General Ammerman, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here today. Thank you to the Civil Affairs Association more widely for this opportunity. I must say it's truly an honor and a privilege to join this forum today. Up front, let me just say that I'm a big fan of this year's theme, winning without fighting. I'm confident this framework will generate the critical dialogue and the unique ideas we need to deliver civil affairs to the Army and the Joint Force. In fact, I would argue that winning without fighting is actually very central to the concept of integrated deterrence, as currently presented in our National Defense Strategy. So I think we have a unique opportunity here over the next couple of days of this symposium to consider this concept specifically through the lens of civil affairs and its unique capability and capacity. So I'd ask you to start off with me, just consider for a moment the environment of strategic competition we find ourselves in today. The aggressive and coercive behaviors of our adversaries around the world is only growing. The pacing threat, specifically from the People's Republic of China, is now more lethal, more technologically advanced, and better networked than ever before. And so this threat can achieve effects, and this kind of gets into multi-domain operations and the new FM30. They can achieve effects now in the physical, the human, and the information dimensions by combining lethal fires and non-lethal capabilities across 5 domains. So traditionally, we have talked about land, air, and sea or maritime domains, but now we have to think about cyber and space as a vehicle to achieve effects in those dimensions. And I think we're seeing that play out today in Ukraine. We saw it a couple years ago, early on in the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And I think we're learning some hard lessons as we go forward. But I think we have to consider the sheer scale of destructive power and devastation to the global order that could result from a large-scale conflict with our strategic adversary. And it should urge all of us to drive ruthlessly towards winning without fighting, or put another way, something I've been thinking about here is just talking about victory before war. As an Army, we are committed to a strong and credible deterrence. Our Army campaign plan aims to build a total Army that is ready and postured for multi-domain operations by 2030, but also to broadcast the immense capability of that Army to all potential adversaries, to deter them from pursuing the path towards large-scale conflict due to the cost our Army can and will impose if forced into war. From my seat here at Fort Bragg as the commander of the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School, this is also my #1 priority. Our mission here is to deliver the doctrine, the training, the leader development, and the personnel solutions for a range of irregular warfare capabilities that are ready and capable to support both the Army and the Joint Force of 2030. And so that brings us to this symposium and the central question we must address now. And I could really use everyone's help to help define this. The question is, what does the Civil Affairs Force of 2030, the force that will contribute to the Army's role in integrated deterrence, look like? There are many stakeholders in shaping this vision, many on the net with us today. Our partnership here at Fort Bragg with the interagency and the reserve component is critical to that effort, I think. For our part, I will offer 3 areas of development the Special Operations Center of Excellence is currently pursuing towards that future CA force. It's not all inclusive. It may not be all the ideas out there, but I think it's moving in the right direction. And I ask you to consider these in your deliberations over the coming days and to give us some feedback, candid, deliberate feedback on how to improve on these initiatives. First and foremost is multi-component training equity and alignment. Here we are driving at the question of critical tasks that form the foundational skills of all CA professionals and the training standards across the active and the reserve component. Second is the development of the 38 Gulf capability. And Joe touched on this a little bit in the immense progress we're making in this initiative. This is an exciting initiative to continuously seek opportunities to bring practitioners and experts of civil governance into our ranks. But I wonder if we could do more. And third, and finally, is the modernization of the active component training pathway. As we look to the Army and the CA force of 2030, what can we do now for the active component in terms of multi-domain integration into training, specifically interested in exposing our soldiers to the information dimension and putting them through a very robust culmination exercise that replicates the future operational environment of 2030. But now to our leading question, what does the CA force of 2030 need to look like? One thing I can say with certainty is that we cannot wait to define it. We must do it today. We should not be comfortable with 2030 as our time horizon. If we consider the pacing threat of the PRC alone, the assessment for a potential crisis to which the US military must respond is actually closer to 2027. We may even see roles for our CA forces well before then in post-conflict Ukraine or across a range of other crises around the globe. This means that the soldiers signing up for CA training today could very well face a crisis or a conflict within their first tour of duty in a CA formation. To drive and implement change to our CA training pathway, we must visualize and describe the CA soldier in multi-domain operations, ruthlessly test, validate, experiment his or her capabilities in training and experimentation, and continually draw from this and ongoing conflicts to evolve our training and leader development strategies. At the Center of Excellence here at Fort Bragg, we are committed to driving this change in our doctrine, our training and leader development, and our personnel strategy to deliver multi-compo special forces, PSYOP, and CA soldiers for 2030. I ask you today to treat this forum with a sense of urgency, as I know you are all equally committed to the task at hand. We know that by 2030, the Joint Force must be prepared to fight and win in large-scale conflicts and multi-domain operations. For our Army Special Operations Forces, that means operating persistently forward, integrated with key allies and partners, and always postured to penetrate and operate in the extended deep areas of a crisis or a conflict of the future. So what does this look like in a framework of an operational area? If I could maybe describe some of this for you. In a denied or adversary controlled territory, SOF will enable indigenous partners to disrupt the enemy, facilitate long-range precision fires across all domains, and set conditions for joint forcible entry of a larger coalition force. SOF is developing means to infiltrate into the enemy's rear area, link up and operate with indigenous partners, and develop capabilities of countering the adversary's integrated and technologically advanced networks that pose direct threats to the joint force. Or in some cases, SOF may be operating in the periphery of a conflict and employ available technologies to ensure and enable core activities by maintaining remote contact with and support to indigenous partners. Both scenarios could play out in the same conflict, but in both, the common denominator is increased technological awareness and integration. The need to move towards data and technology literacy as a second nature cannot be clearer. For our civil affairs forces, uniquely and sometimes actually exclusively, they must constantly be focused on transitions along the competition continuum. Much of our CA capability is developed during strategic competition through deliberate engagement with host nations to understand civil governance structures and systems. And then when crisis and conflict emerge, CA forces uses this depth of knowledge to advise commanders and set the conditions simultaneously in the deep, close, and rear areas of a conflict for post-conflict transition back to functioning host nation governance systems. As the Army conducts MDO to dominate our adversary, CA forces are always looking to the transition of enemy-controlled territory to friendly forces. The transition to sustainable stability will likely take place after the conventional forces move through an area. But interestingly, and there's some recent examples of this, it could also happen in the deep area. Depending on the relative capability and strength of partnered indigenous forces compared to that of the adversary, CA forces may very well have the opportunity to oversee a transition to local or host nation control prior to the arrival of a coalition or a joint force. A manner of this scenario actually played out in recent history in Syria during Operation Inherent Resolve. And I think this is an interesting case study. Certainly happy to address some questions from the audience about this. But I would say it this way: as the Syrian Democratic Forces, or the SDF, were enabled by small teams of SOF advisors, they reclaimed terrain controlled by ISIS. It was civil affairs team leaders that found themselves in the role of temporary de facto mayors for large cities in Syria, probably the largest of which was Raqqa, specifically the ISIS caliphate in Syria at the time. They found themselves administering governance functions while working to reestablish SDF control and stability in northeast Syria. In fact, this leveraging of small CA teams along with other SOF in the periphery enabled the CJTF to focus on its main effort in liberating large swaths of territory in neighboring Iraq. CA individuals and units must be prepared for the possibility that indigenous partners will seize enemy-controlled terrain and begin similar localized transition in a future fight. And many of the OIR lessons are being codified in CA doctrine and training today. Admittedly, in the conflict we seek to deter for 2027 and beyond, we anticipate a much more formidable opponent than ISIS. The conflict we must prepare for will likely limit CA impacts in the deep area to civil network development and condition setting, which will require a transition from soft civil affairs to conventional civil affairs as the FLOT moves forward. As I visualize this 2030 battlefield, soft civil affairs forces would have the charge of developing and engaging and leveraging civil networks in the deep area to identify key governance systems and infrastructure to be preserved as the joint force advances against the enemy. This would include key individuals and organizations that would enable the rapid reconstitution of host nation governance and stabilization while maintaining economy of force. As the friendly front moves forward and a given sector of the deep area transitions to the close area, the situation will become even more dynamic. The focus for employment of those civil networks becomes immediate management of civilian displacement and fallout, as well as integrating the network's civil information into operations intelligence and the targeting process to enhance and enable friendly maneuver. As the deep area becomes the close area based on conditions, the soft civil affairs force that is subordinate to a special operations joint task force will transition responsibilities to a conventional civil affairs force working for the JTF that seizes control of the area. As the close area becomes the immediate friendly area, CA must then leverage civil networks in support of exercising transitional military authority and meeting the immediate government's needs of the war-affected populace. To oversee the consolidation of gains and longer-term stabilization effort, the CA force must have adequate functional expertise in the form of that 38 Gulf military government officer to support and enable the host nation to resume effective civil administration. Of course, this all has to happen while accounting for and countering advanced technological multi-domain threats and weapon systems of a sophisticated adversary. Additionally, to have civil networks accessible to enable all of this activity in a potential conflict as early as 2027, those networks must be identified and at least partially developed prior to crisis or conflict. So clearly we have our work cut out for us. But it is with this understanding and this framing of the problem in mind that the Center of Excellence has started movement towards preparing the CA force for 2030 in the three areas I mentioned earlier: multi-component training, equity, and alignment, the 38 Gulf program development, and the active component pathway modernization. So first, on the matter of cross-component training, equity, and alignment. This is a topic that is neither unfamiliar nor uncontentious for many in the audience, but I currently assess that for our Compo 3 CA forces and reserve officers in particular, the initial training qualification pathway is not sufficient to ensure the transition of CA responsibilities from the close area to the rear areas I just described. This presents a risk to mission that we must address in our training and leader development programs. Now, a common counter argument is to raise examples of exceptional officers and NCOs with unique civilian skills in the reserve component, who by all accounts can run circles around most of the active component governance talents. But certainly such individuals do exist. There are highly talented individuals in the reserve component who, by benefit of unique experiences in their full-time civilian career, or just sheer natural aptitude, can easily handle anything the future environment may throw at them. However, we cannot build a capability around this idea or hope of having such exceptional individuals in every place we will need them in the future. To ensure we have a sufficiently trained core of reserve CA officers and NCOs who, with a collective training cycle, are adequately prepared to perform their role in MDO, we must expand the length of the reserve officer qualification course to match the length of the active component phase 1 course. A similar disparity exists between enlisted reserve MOS transfer soldiers coming into CA, and we are looking to pursue a similar expansion for that population. The expansion will require a commitment of resources, no doubt about it, but it would simplify training requirements across all compos and lend itself for better interoperability between CA elements dispersed across the joint force operational framework. This change does not equate to sending reservists through the full active component pathway, as is often discussed. but that idea is not off the table entirely either. In terms of alignment, we're also looking at the possibility of compo rebalancing to address both the many current unfilled requisitions for SOF in the global force management system and the future demands of SOF, CA, and PSYOP in the potential large-scale conflicts of 2030 and beyond. The concept is to align force structure in the Compo 2 or 3 that attends the full pathway and maintains a SOF capability. The National Guard looks like an attractive option initially, mainly due to proven model of SF National Guardsmen attending the full SF training pathway and the ability of aligning force structure against states with large tax bases and relatively frequent natural disasters. Such states have the resources to adequately man, train, and equip SOF units, and unfortunate as such events are, ample opportunities for CA to practice their skills in real-world situations. The analysis is ongoing, and I hope this forum generates useful ideas to propel them forward. Given what we know and anticipate, a highly capable conventional CA force, interoperable with a soft CA force, is critical for the 2030 fight. Second, the 38 Gulf Initiative. This is another program that is vital to our capability to successfully transition post-conflict, and one that the Center of Excellence here at Fort Bragg has made significant progress on. 38 Gulf program, which was approved in 2013 and saw the first in-service transfers in 2015, has surged following CA proponents' Force Modernization Assessment, or FMA, conducted from 2019 to 2021. The FMA identified the need to reinvigorate the program and lean forward on establishing the direct commission process. We need to bring in exquisite talent from civilian sectors. This was clearly established in the FMA and is equally clear for the 2030 flight. We direct commissioned the first candidate into the 38 Gulf program in December of last year, and we have 89 more direct commission candidates currently in the process. The next major step now is to finalize and codify the training pathway for direct commissions into the program. We currently rely on seats at BOLIC B from other branches for initial officer qualification, but the goal should be to create a new BOLIC specifically designed for our military governance specialists. A robust core of experts across the various domains of governance is within reach, and we will continue to pursue this critical capability. And I would challenge this group to think about other gaps that could be filled with such a program. Third, and lastly, the active component training pathway modernization is another initiative spurred forward by the Civil Affairs Force Modernization Assessment, and an essential component of building the CA force of 2030. The most significant change from previous iterations of the CA qualification course that many of you experience is the direct acknowledgement and specific training and education on governance. This is a term that not only CA, but the Joint Force shied away from for many years. This will soon change as the Transitional Governance ATP is now in the drafting stages with CA proponent. It is important to note that while CA forces have dealt directly with matters that impact and influence host nation governance through their history, it was not addressed directly and called by that term for many years. CA proponent and our 3rd Training Battalion here at SWCS are currently addressing that with specific modules on governance in both phase 1 and phase 2 of the active component pathway. And we are incorporating direct governance problems and scenarios into our culmination exercise known as Operation Sluss Tiller to validate an individual governance understanding and competence. Active component soft CA forces must understand governance systems to set the conditions for successful reestablishment of effective host nation governance systems post-conflict. But we should not be satisfied with only addressing governance without taking into account information advantage implications on the future CA mission. We have successfully implemented a synthetic internet training environment in our PSYOP culmination exercise, and we should expand this to CA exercises to build inherently digital native soldiers that can extend their understanding of governance and influence into the information dimension. There are likely other initiatives we can build on here, and I welcome your thoughts to continuously refine our training. So in closing this morning, I sought to paint a picture of what CA forces must be prepared to do in the future fight of 2030 and offer some areas of development currently underway at the Special Warfare Center and School. It's not a complete picture, admittedly. We need all of your help to better understand and define what will be required for the force of 2030. To be frank, we won't fully know what that environment of 2030 will demand until 2030, but we should not stop and wait until we are faced with a crisis or a conflict. The history of futurology indicates that this is all but certain to be the case. And with that in mind, however, we must rigorously explore the possibilities and develop so that we may be prepared to adjust to the future reality from a position of strength. I discussed some of the avenues we are pursuing to try to prepare for this uncertain future, but again, I want to emphasize, I do not think these measures alone are enough. We are looking for more innovative ways to shape a CA force that is capable of enabling the MDO fight and ensuring the successful consolidation of gains and post-conflict stabilization. This call for a robust transition capability may raise a question in some of your minds, since we started with winning without fighting as the goal. Why do we need to invest in transition capability? Shouldn't we focus all efforts on lethal capabilities to deter and eliminate the need for transition? Here's what I would offer. To deter the calamity of a great power conflict, we must be prepared to credibly excel in every phase of a crisis or a conflict. From mobilization, deployment, RSO&I to transition and post-conflict stabilization, our preparedness and the credibility of our preparedness must leave no question in our adversaries' decision-making process that we stand ready to impose more costs on them than they stand to gain from offensive action. With that, I implore all of you to take the opportunity these 2 days forward to deepen our collective understanding of the future fight, to widen our aperture of the means to improve our posture, and to move forward from this event with actionable solutions to get us where we need to be. Challenge yourselves and each other to meet the urgent demands of the nation. Thank you all for this opportunity. I welcome any comments or questions in the time we have remaining. Sir, back over to you to moderate.
Hey, thanks, Will. Really good comments there. The first question will be from Steve Ferenzi. Okay, Steve's question, he says, that can you discuss specifically the role of irregular warfare and CA in integrated deterrence now and in 2030?
Yeah, sir, thanks. And thanks for the question. So, you know, I would start by saying that SOF, civil affairs, PSYOP, special forces, and our conventional counterparts, I think, are inherently built and trained to conduct irregular warfare. And so the way we see it here at SWCS and within USAJFKSWCS is that we do irregular warfare on a regular basis, and we have to look at it through the lens of strategic competition. Being forward, present, and engaged inside the theaters at the contact layer, if you will, with our allies and partner in close proximity to these hotspots is absolutely critical. And I think that presence forward, number one, contributes directly to integrated deterrence. I think number two, having civil affairs embedded with our SFABs, with our SOF formations, with our joint force in these engagements provides them an opportunity to better understand the operational environment, understand forms and structures of governance and systems that we may have to either shape or influence to achieve strategic objectives in a crisis or a conflict, or systems that we may have to reestablish should we, God forbid, have to fight a war with an adversary on a large scale. So again, to me, irregular warfare is inherently tied to competition. In my mind, that is the competition we conduct today that allows us to win without fighting and assures victory before war, should it come to that. So thanks for the question. Hopefully that addressed it. If there's a follow-on, please let me know.
Okay, I read an article on basically the influence triad, it was called, I believe, and it was about cyberspace and information operations. And I'm assuming the information, was something that USAJFK, I think, was working on. And I'm assuming the information operations included psychological operations in that. But can you talk about civil affairs in that, and how come that wasn't included in that concept?
Yeah, thanks, sir. So the triad really speaks to the integration of soft and all soft capabilities with cyber and space. And this is already inherently happening on a larger scale, but really at the USAJFK level, what we are trying to do is reach out to the other Army service components that bring space and cyber to the joint force and create a collaborative environment where we can experiment and train together on how soft access, placement, and influence can enable space and cyber capabilities. And so it could be all three pillars of that triad working together. It could be a soft formation enabling access for a space effect. It could be a soft formation enabling access for a cyber effect, or vice versa. So, when we say soft, I think certainly in the civil affairs soft arena, that is definitely part of the equation, maybe not explicitly highlighted in some of the literature you may have read. But I think that is currently being experimented in our combat training centers, NTC and JRTC, where we are integrating soft teams with civil affairs PSYOP and special forces with space and cyber capabilities. I think CA is a very nuanced capability, which has, by definition, probably more ability to influence human dimension. But this is why I want to integrate the information dimension into our culmination exercises, and why I think civil affairs, through its access and placement with foreign governance and governance systems and governance partners, may actually offer soft and space and cyber access that maybe we haven't considered yet. So I think we need to experiment, sir. I think everything's on the table. And I think certainly bringing the information dimension to civil affairs and how civil affairs can achieve effects through multi-domain operations in the information dimension is very interesting to me, and something that I think we can move forward. Over.
Okay, thanks, sir. Next question is from Rafa Linera. Go ahead, Rafa.
Oh, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Sir, this is Rafa Linera from Johns Hopkins University. I understand that right now they're developing a governance support and also a civil affairs information warfare courseware. You mentioned earlier with regards to the civil network development. Do you see that as part of the CAQC, or perhaps an advanced course understanding the classifications level?
Yeah, thanks, Rafa. So I think both. In terms of civil network development, I think there are core concepts that need to be trained in the qualification course, and probably certainly from a civil reconnaissance perspective, that is critical to some of the capabilities we're providing the RSOF formation right now. But I think, when I look at the advent of the 38 Gulf program, what's interesting to me is where we could go with that particular capability and exploring advanced training opportunities in our second training group, where we do advanced training and maybe cycle civil affairs professionals back here for advanced capabilities. So I think, in my mind, it's both. I think we're still kind of fleshing this out a little bit, but certainly civil network development is already in our curriculum for the qualification course for the RSOF professionals. Could it go beyond that? I think there's absolutely applicability. And so, I think that's a great challenging question to the audience here, which I would be very interested in, a broader perspective from the audience in terms of what is the difference between the core competency of a basic civil affairs soldier for civil network development, and then what would be the advanced tasks or skills that we would need maybe later on in a civil affairs professional's career. Because I think something we all appreciate on this forum is you can have a basic civil affairs soldier that understands basic concepts, but until they get a few iterations under their belt, they get a few deployments, they operate forward, they don't really move into that graduate level understanding of governance, civil networks, until later in their career. And so when do we bring them back for that advanced skill and that advanced capability development? I think that's a very, very valid question. Thanks for raising that.
Thank you, sir.
All right, our next question will then be from Baskins. Sorry, I don't have a complete name there.
So, sir, I think I see the question in the text box about integration across the U.S. government.
Correct.
And so, we talk about whole of government approaches, which I think sometimes has been kind of a broad term for how do we bring in the interagency to our DoD capabilities and really create an opportunity to leverage a broader whole of government across instruments of national power approach to resolving some of these challenges. So should there be increased integration? I think the short answer is yes, absolutely. That is something we should consistently be working to improve on. And that's why I think, we welcome interagency contributions to our curriculum here at SWCS. And I think inherently our civil affairs professionals, when they deploy overseas, are very comfortable working in an interagency environment with the Department of State. And I'll just kind of use a vignette as an example with my recent experience as the SOGITF commander during Operation Inherent Resolve, where we had two very different strategic frameworks at play to defeat ISIS. In Iraq, we were working with a sovereign nation where we had an established embassy, a partnership with the government, and a long-term strategic objective of sustaining that partnership and being present for the long term with this nation. So we were working with the host nation, and the embassy was driving that relationship as we worked to defeat ISIS. And as we reestablished governance through the Iraqis in places like Ramadi and Mosul, as we slowly took land back from ISIS, the Iraqis were actually reluctant to bring in civil affairs because they had their own governance frameworks and they wanted to reestablish that on their own terms, at their own pace, with their own institutions. And so our civil affairs were mostly operating at the operational and strategic level, advising commanders on how to work within the host nation Iraqi system, which inherently meant having to work through Department of State and their relationship with the Iraqi state. In Syria, that was very much an irregular warfare approach, where we were working with what I would characterize as a non-state actor, a partner certainly, but a non-state actor that did not represent the government of Assad and Syria, but actually represented more of an autonomous region in northeast Syria, the Syrian Democratic Forces. And so the policy objectives of the United States were more ambiguous there. And the goal was very much to defeat ISIS. And as long as that goal was maintained, everything else we were doing in Northeast Syria was tied to that objective. So there was kind of an external policy perspective, but at the end of the day, our civil affairs professionals really were forced to work very locally with the Syrian Democratic Forces to reestablish governance as we reclaim territory from ISIS. And so that then meant integrating with certain allies and partners that had whole of government approaches in Northeast Syria. It meant integrating with the Department of State at the strategic level to understand long-term policy objectives for Northeast Syria, understanding that there was always kind of this backstop to everything we did in Syria, and that it should never look like our attempt to undermine or seize power from the Assad regime. So this very delicate balance where there was a need for critical integration with the Department of State. And at the time, Ambassador Jeffries, who was overseeing the reestablishment of diplomatic relationships in Syria. So two very delicate, but very, very much integrated whole of government approaches by their very nature in the Operation Inherent Resolve framework. So again, back to the question, yes, absolutely. I think there are case studies for this already out there. And then in strategic competition, inherently, when a CA element is forward inside of a country, it will always be integrated with the Department of State, the Chief of Mission, and work through and with that mission strategic objectives for that country. Over.
Thank you. The next question is from Anthony Curry. Go ahead, Anthony.
I'm sorry, I'm speaking from home. So if you hear my child, I apologize. This is a question from a colleague, not from myself, on our internal communication channel. I'll read it out. All communication disciplines, PsyOps, Info Ops, Media and Comms, should come together to form a career field. Is it a good idea or not? And obviously, I appreciate from your side, it may be separate. Thank you very much.
Hey, sir, thanks for passing on the question. I appreciate it. So, this is interesting. It's a lively debate right now within the Army as we develop doctrine on information advantage and the core tasks that we seek to accomplish through information advantage. Should it be a single career field, or are there unique capabilities that to draw on to achieve information advantage? I think, for me personally, I tend to fall on the latter, which is PSYOP forces do PSYOP things uniquely tied to their doctrine and their capabilities, tied to influence, but that is only one aspect of information advantage. And so where they may focus on influencing foreign forces, what they cannot do is inform domestic audiences, drive data-driven decision-making for the commander, which is also tied to information. And so as we look at the information dimension and define information advantage, I think there are multiple actors and multiple capabilities in the joint force that can achieve different aspects of information advantage. And so to create one career field, I think would perhaps subdue some of the unique capabilities we have. And I would argue, our own civil affairs and our special forces as well have an ability to influence and shape the information dimension. So I think as long as we understand the concept of multi-domain operations and we conduct operations through those domains, I'm more interested in making sure our information professionals understand multi-domain operations, how to achieve effects through land, sea, air, cyber, and space in the human, the physical, and the information dimension. And I think every aspect of the joint force can do that. So I don't necessarily see a need for consolidating into one career field. So just one person's perspective, but I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Daniel Moriarty. Go ahead, Daniel.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. I guess my question is on integrated deterrence in IW or irregular warfare, and specifically the role that nonviolent or civil resistance plays in those frameworks. It's been discussed in documents like the ROC, but just kind of would curious if you could elaborate on what role SOFCA or any kind of a Compa 3CA should play in understanding or developing those kinds of campaigns with respect to resistance and resilience. Over.
Yeah, it's a great question and very timely as we look at some of the crisis we see around the world right now. So I think I would start with this concept of building resilience in our allies and partners. And I think our civil affairs professionals are uniquely trained to address this concept of resilience. And I think we see it play out in Ukraine right now, where probably we underestimated, certainly the international community underestimated the Ukrainians' ability to resist a Russian invasion of their sovereign nation. But I think that resilience was built over time. I think the invasion of Crimea in 2014 certainly raised alarm bells inside of Ukraine, and they deliberately reached out to the US and other allies and partners to help them develop resistance operating concepts and this notion of resilience in society and resilience in governance to build a capability, an organic capability to resist and then recover from a Russian invasion. I think we're seeing that play out now. And I think that was in large part due to the engagement of the joint force early on to develop these resistance operating concepts, to develop a more professional military, but also within Ukraine, their ability to leverage information to develop an identity, a unique identity as a nation, independent and sovereign from Russia. And amazing how quickly they were able to do that and how that stuck over time. So I think there's just tremendous lessons learned there from irregular warfare and strategic competition in terms of what can be done. Now the question becomes, as we look at a potential conflict in the Straits of Taiwan by 2027, can that be applied there? Can we ask the question of resilience in a country like Taiwan? And can we understand just how potential resistance to occupation and then resilience to recover from an attack by the PRC could be applied in Taiwan? And I think there's some great dialogue and discussion there. I think our civil affairs professionals in Taiwan would be well suited and certainly help us, number one, assess those civil networks and the resiliency of those civil networks, but also the resiliency of their own governance and their own identity as a separate nation. As we know, ethnically, they're still Chinese. And there is this question of scale between China and Taiwan. But that's one place where we're taking a hard look at the concepts of resistance and resiliency. So really interesting problem set. I think now for us here in the schoolhouse is taking a hard look at where we can apply that in training, in doctrine, and build a training pathway and a leader development model that integrates these concepts. Because to me, that's absolutely fascinating. And again, I don't think it's unique to civil affairs. I think from an irregular warfare perspective, the Army would tell you that they also do irregular warfare, and they've done it for the preponderance of their history, more than they've done large-scale combat operations. And so there's a whole joint force approach to this that is very interesting as we move forward. But I do want to take some of these lessons and bring it into our school here, maybe apply some of this in the doctrine and export it even beyond SWCS. And then, the last thing, Dan, I would tell you is what is interesting now is the Army has given proponency for irregular warfare to Fort Bragg and the Special Warfare Center and School. So we are now standing up an irregular warfare proponent here on top of our civil affairs, PSYOP, and special forces proponent. There's a fourth proponent standing up here for irregular warfare. Now, that's not to say irregular warfare is exclusively the realm of SOF, but I think the Army has realized, as they focus rightfully so on winning large-scale combat operations, shifting irregular warfare and focus for irregular warfare to a force that is persistently engaged forward and persistently partnered with indigenous forces forward, I think has some value. But we're not going to do it all ourselves. I think there's a total Army approach to this. So thanks, Dan, for the question. Hopefully.
Okay, our next question then is with Pete Griffith at PKSOI. Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. My question was, how is SWCS and PKSOI collaborating to achieve the professional military education training requirements for the CA enterprise? I'm from DOS, not PKSOI, by the way, but thank you for.
Hey, Pete, thanks for the question. Can you say again the acronym? Which organization?
How is SWCS working with the Peacekeeping and Stabilization Operations Institute up in Carlisle?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. So again, with the irregular warfare proponency coming to SWCS, that the PKSOI piece has been retained by the Army at, as you stated, at Carlisle. So our proponent role builds an inherent relationship with the PKSOI. That has to be there as we develop future doctrine. I think what we're going to see here is a move by the Army to push for an irregular warfare field manual that actually describes irregular warfare with a common framework for all things that the Army does in irregular warfare. And I think PKSOI is going to play a critical role in that. I know our CA proponent specifically has a relationship with them. I've been in the seat 90 days, so I personally have not gone up there yet or connected to them. But your question just prompted me to put that on my list of things to do. But that, to me, it's the proponent role that will inherently build that. And I would add to that list the security force assistance responsibility that resides with the security force assistance brigades and the security force assistance command right here on Fort Bragg, right down the street. I think that those are two very critical relationships that we have to build and bridge as we move forward as an irregular warfare proponent.
Thank you. Our next question is from Besser Rayet. Probably butchered your name there a little bit, but you ask your question.
Thank you, sir. My question is basically on in the context of great power competition. What are the perspectives of corporations should take into account to resist asymmetric threats posed by hostile countries? I mean, as far as Russia goes, there's considerable mobilization and deterrence and protection and defense. However, China is really doing a lot of shape shifting and shape changing. So I guess if you had to speak to a CEO, to a leader from a military leader to a civilian leader, what would be your words of wisdom? Over. Thank you, sir.
Hey, sir, that's a really interesting question. Thank you for that. So I think a couple things come to mind. I don't talk to a lot of CEOs, but if I had the opportunity, I think the first thing I would implore them to do is cyber hardening and make sure that they protect their networks and their systems from cyber attack and penetration. I would submit in the cyber domain, we are at war now and every day. Literally pushing away thousands of cyber attacks on a daily basis from a range of different actors, not just nation states, but also non-state actors. But I think, if I were a CEO today, that would be one area where I would absolutely push them to harden their capabilities. I think number two is probably understanding the influence that they can have based on where they reside in various sectors of the economy on the information dimension and the human dimension. And I say that because their ability to communicate to a wide audience, I think, is really interesting to me. And I think whether they realize it or not, they are a global, if not a local influencer. They can shape perceptions more than they probably like to admit. And so being aware of that, being aware of their messaging, I think is critical. But the human aspect to me is really important. And, I'll kind of go out on a bit of a tangent here, but I would really appreciate an opportunity to work with several CEOs out there on our recruiting problem. And the fact that as an Army, we are struggling to bring in talent from the wider civilian population, whether or not our young Americans out there and even our first generation Americans or newly immigrated Americans seek job opportunities and pathways and purpose in life. The military does not seem to appear at the top of their list. And so I think our CEOs out there in a position of influence with society and young Americans, and we could use their help right now with recruiting and influencing that younger generation. So that's just kind of a little bit off the cuff. I did not expect that question, but I do appreciate it. I guess probably there is a link to draw this back to the symposium here with CEOs and large corporations to our civil affairs pipeline as well. And I do wonder if there are some things in large corporations that could be integrated into our training, or at least in some of our guest lectures. Like, I would welcome any CEO to come talk to us about how they manage their organizations, about how they see civil society and civil governance. Basir, I see you have a follow-on, so I'll go back to you and see.
Yes, please. Actually, I had a wonderful experience several years ago. I don't want to provide a company name, but it is in a major internet service provider, and one of their leader is actually a Navy SEAL. So you could really communicate national security, and then there were certain national security things. I come from more of risk management information background, so there were certain things that I've communicated, and interestingly enough, in 3 to 6 months' time, a lot of those things transpired. So perhaps opening up lines of channels through reservists, but this also applies to I'm Turkish. This applies across the alliance. I mean, many years ago, I got kicked out from a meeting because I was criticizing China, and Turkey was going to buy a Chinese missile defense system in 2012. So could have never envisaged Russian missile defense system. Once again, so there's that lack of vigilance. So I guess vigilance and trust building exercise. Over. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, great points. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. I think we got one more question or comment from Chris Volchek. Go ahead, Chris.
Dan, thanks very much. And General Beaurpere, thank you so much for this brilliant presentation. I'm going to ask your aide to give us a copy of your speaking notes so we can make sure when we write the report that this is accurately represented, because there's just a wealth of information that you've briefed today, and the comments certainly back me up in the chat room. I just wanted to take 1 minute, because I know we're really pressed for time. I wanted to take 1 minute to share something that I was putting together for this morning, and I'm just going to show this one slide. General, what I did is there it is. What I did is I did a quick look at NATO and US strategy, both from this year. And what this whole thing screams out is our allies and us, there's a lot of convergence between us and our allies on this point, and as well organizations like the UN, which you may have the privilege of hearing later on tomorrow when we do the multinational panel. But the word that screams out here is integration, civil military integration, not only across all the domains, but at every level imaginable. And this is really a capacity and a capability that we can really help the Army and the Joint Force with. And the one thing that I think that comes out on here, and I don't know if you're going to be able to listen to some of our allies from the Center for Civic Center of Excellence in NATO talk to us. But I think the one thing that I would just want to point out to you, sir, is that we need to work even more closely with our allies than we ever have. This is our key strength, our ability, like General Hooper made a couple of years ago, our ability to, to have our alliances and our partners working with us. That is a critical strategic advantage we have over our adversaries, and we really need to cultivate that. And I think both national strategies, the NATO strategy, the different what's coming out in FM 3.0, and their discussions about the human dimension and how war is the real center of gravity of wars we're seeing in Ukraine right now is in fact the human dimension and civilian resilience, civilian resistance, all these different things, and how irregular warfare actually helps to help those capacities win. And this is in fact a way for us winning. We're winning without fighting right now by what we're doing with the Ukrainians without putting a single one of our guys on the ground. So all of these things scream out we really need institutionally to work much more closely with our allies. And I think they're very well prepared to do that with us. So that's my comment, sir. And out to you. And thank you for your service and thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, General Beaupere, thank you very much for joining us and kicking off this symposium. Some very insightful comments, and I think you gave us a lot to consider and a great lead off to this event. A lot of great things happening with the Civil Affairs Force between now and 2030, and I just want to thank you for giving us so many good things to think about and consider. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity.
All right, with that, I'll turn it on over to Chris Holchek.
Yes, thank you, Dan, and brilliant job as usual. Got lots of notes, but I think you took more notes than I did at the Q&A. We're going to bounce over now to workshop 1, but this doesn't automatically happen. So you're going to have to sign off here and then sign back in using the links that you got in the message. If you've registered, obviously you have. So you got to go to that link and open up there, and Dennis Cahill will be waiting for us. So out here, everybody, and we'll see you in a minute.